All right, we're back. New outfit, new day, new fresh set of eyes. And what we were running into before was trying to connect this local CAN instance to our local Laravel application, but things stopped rendering here for a moment. So the local one works, but if I were to bring up the actual remote URL, it just didn't load. And I noticed here that our local Vite server that's serving all of our code and assets is HTTP. And so it's getting blocked since we have an HTTPS public URL, but an HTTP local server. So it's always a fun one to try to figure out the exact configuration to get working. I think we could add this Vite plugin basic SSL to our local environment, and then it'll respin up the Vite server with the SSL configuration that we need. That should probably take care of the issue. But the other thing that I noticed in some research was about Laravel Herd. And what this is kind of this third-party GUI that allows us to manage our Laravel sites without having to enter the CLI at all. And I think it gives us some extra nice features like secured URLs, secured servers, and also these vanity URLs. If you remember, we were having trouble with the .test URL at the beginning of this video. And I think that's because it's not actually included when you are creating a new application using the Laravel CLI. It doesn't actually set up a test vanity URL for you. That seems to be something that's included in an application like Herd. So I'm going to go ahead and download this and install Herd, and we'll see about maybe connecting our existing application to Laravel Herd and getting it imported so we can see what kind of niceties we get included. So we'll go ahead and set this up really quick. Now, I think this is containerizing all of these sites as well. So we are going to get an instance of PHP, even though we already have one installed on this machine. This is part of the setup process for Laravel Herd. So we'll just keep rolling with it here and see what happens. I don't have a Herd Pro account, so I'm going to skip for now. So I'm just going to click Let's Get Started. Now, if I click on up here, there's this little H in the toolbar now, the taskbar, and it says I have no sites found. So I'll go ahead and click Add Site, and we have an existing site. So instead of creating a new Laravel project, I want to link an existing project. So I'll click that, hit Next, and I'm going to navigate to where I have this saved, dkiss code and Mux Guestbook PHP, and there is our Laravel application. So I'll select that, PHP version 8.4, HTTPS, click Next, creating your project, and it says application successfully created, built something amazing. So open in browser, and man, we still are getting a white screen of death here. So let me see, maybe I need to stop the local server. Stop this one. There we go. So I stopped the local server that I was running and just let Laravel Herd take over, and now it seemed to be loading. Okay, but this is not the screen that I expect to see. We weren't creating a new project. We wanted to use the existing code that we had. All right, I did a little bit of extra Googling, and I found that if I run the npm run dev command locally here, it will spin up the Vite server, which before it was kind of pulling from a build folder that was an old build folder under the public directory. But when I spin up this npm run dev, now it has this kind of local server spun up that will load our assets from the dev server instead. So I think this is maybe the approach there. That seems like, I guess I was kind of expecting that to happen within Herd here, is that it would also kind of manage the asset server, but it seems to be loading as expected. So we made it here. That's great. And what I noticed too, there's this kind of this expose functionality. I don't know if this is of Herd or just the Laravel ecosystem, but it also does tunneling here. That's neat. That's new to me. So maybe another option to get a public URL set up with expose. But I'm going to see if I can just continue down the path of getting the Laravel video guestbook set up within my local CAN, which I already have. So here is the public link here. This one's old from yesterday, so I'm just going to scratch this unpublished domain. We'll delete the public URL. I'm just going to actually just start fresh here. Let's see if we can get this going again. So delete all, add domain. We'll continue with, what do we want the domain to be? We already have a local domain. That's kind of the interesting part of all of this, but we'll just say Laravideo guestbook.local, and it's going to, now I want to double check to see if this, just running herd, does this localhost 8000 still work? No, it doesn't. So maybe I have to send it directly to the Mux guestbook php.test. Here's what I'm trying to do. I guess I'm setting up a second local domain here, having a target server, HTTPS, Mux guestbook PHP. This was set up by Herd. We're using port 443 for the secure connection. Seems okay there. So let's make a persistent URL, public URL. And if we get lucky, which I sure hope we do, this should load up okay. And it doesn't. So I am going to have to debug this a little bit more off screen and see what we can get set up without going too much further down this rabbit hole. Well, sometimes after debugging long enough, you run into an old friend. Ran into this Aaron Francis video, incredible video. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a deep dive on this topic, checking out some of what Aaron goes through in this video. But we did get it working here, at least for this local machine. And the way that we ended up changing or setting this up was in the Laravel guestbook within localcan, there was this edit domain area down here. So you can see this looks kind of the same. We have our made up local host name here. The target host name is still the same. This is the application that's running, and then URL that's generated by Herd on port 43. And the public URL is the same. The only change we made here is that let's include the host request header and change it to make sure it kind of like tricks our local application to making sure that it's loading on the local.test domain rather than our public domain. So I changed those to match the target server host rather than the original host of the request, which would be this localcan URL. So that's working okay. And then the other change that I made was over here within our Vite config. I just allowed cores for the Vite server to make sure that any requests that happen across different URLs are going to be loaded okay. And that seems to be doing what we're looking for. So struggling with this process for sure. Anywho, we got our port forwarding working, which is good. We have this public URL that can now be reached by Mux webhooks, and webhooks are essential for the way that this application is going to work. We need to make sure that that whole chain of communication is in place and dependable. And for now, we have it set up in a way that looks pretty healthy. So I'm going to take this URL, and this is what we're going to configure for our Mux webhooks to contact, is this URL. We also have to set up a handler locally for those webhooks. So we know that any events that are sent in from Mux can be successfully delivered to the application, handled by the correct route or controller, and we act on it as we need to. So update a database record, or maybe send an event down to the client that something's happened. So let's go down that path now. Now, if I run PHP artisan route list, you'll notice here that we do get a webhook handler route as part of the Laravel Mux package that we've installed. So we'll have to reference the documentation to see how we can inject our own custom functionality for handling the events that are delivered via a post method to this endpoint. But this does tell us where we need to send our events. So it's going to be a combination of the localcan URL that was generated, and it's going to have Mux and webhook at the end of it. So this is the URL that we'll use to send all of the webhooks for the guestbook over to. Next, we'll jump in to see how we can customize this controller so we can handle those events as we need to. Just as a quick test, I'm back over in our posting CLI, and I'm going to paste our Laravel guestbook trial localcan URL in here with that ending. It's a post request. Let's click send and see what happens. We have a 500. I don't know where the error is coming from here. Maybe if we check our local logs, we can see a little bit more about what this error actually is, but must be a type array null given. So it's probably because we're not sending an actual webhook body as part of the event here, which is pretty much expected for any post request that goes to this kind of endpoint. So let's make sure that the post requests are working as expected when we actually have it within Mux. So I was taking a quick look at the docs for this package, and it looks like the events that are sent from Mux when a webhook is handled will actually fire off a Laravel event. So we can then handle that event by creating a listener, which is kind of the handler that waits for events to be fired within Laravel. So nice to have the kind of this communication bus within Laravel. I don't know of anything like that that exists within Next.js, which is pretty neat to have that sort of functionality built in for communication of what's happening within your application. So over here in the events area for Laravel, we can see generating events and listeners, and there's a command down here that's PHP artisan make listener. So assuming that there are events that are being fired off by the package for the Mux integration, we'll have a listener for those events in place as well. What should the listener be named? I'm just going to copy the name of the listener class that's in the example over here. And what event should be listened for, we're going to handle that in a little bit. So I'll just hit OK. And it's created this app listeners Mux event listener area over here. So looking at the docs, we have a specific webhook received event that is fired. So we'll make sure to use that here, import kind of that namespace. And we have a handler right here in place. So for the handle function, it's going to receive this webhook received event, and we can handle the event down here, it looks like. So I'll go ahead and now this seems kind of just like the type, I guess, of what we're coming in as the event over here. And this is where you would update your models in your application based off of the events that are sent. So here, we'll have to adjust this just a little bit, but I'm going to copy these examples here. And let's just quickly get this in place. So there's a matcher, and then there's a handler for both of these different events. So I'll go ahead and accept this change. And we're seeing two different events that are requesting to be handled here. So default is an unhandled event, but if we have a new asset that's ready or some kind of error has been encountered, then we should have these callback functions that are called as a result of receiving that event and do the work that we need to do here to update. In our case, it's going to be update the database and possibly send down events, propagate them down to the client so the client can update as well. And just as a quick test, what I ended up doing here was in the post request in this posting app, I mocked the body of a video asset ready event. And we see here that the handler over here just echoes out video asset ready. It's just a way to print a string in PHP and then exits the program with untimely death. So if we run that request over here in the posting app, we can see that it is printed out to the body. So we are reaching this function correctly. Now it's just time to handle the event and wire it all up. Now I'm back over here in the Next.js application, and here is our webhook handler for these events that are coming in. So we have this request body comes in, we destructure it so we can see the type and data. We switch on the types and handle the different webhook types via this switch right here. So there's, I think, 3 different events for this application that we care the most about. And that is when an upload is created or the asset is created, when the asset is ready, and when the video.asset.created event is also called here. So we're going to go through and make sure we implement these 3 events in our Laravel application over in our Mux event listener. So let's go ahead and let's just do these 2 at first. We got the video asset created and video asset ready. I'm going to copy this block, and we're going to add an additional event here. So these, because they share the same functionality, we're going to rename handle video asset shared events, video asset, shared events. And I believe that we can just check in this payload if we need to do anything different based off of what was created or already here. But let's just get this part going and implemented right here. So I'm going to take our old code, paste it in here, and say implement this handler, but in PHP. Hit enter. Let's see what it comes up with for us. Okay, this is looking like it's in the general direction that we wanted to go, which is let's take the payload data and get all of the different variables that we're going to use out of it, which is the pass-through, status, playback IDs, and the aspect ratio. This is pretty readable, but I do miss kind of the destructuring that JavaScript is providing here, but it's neither here nor there. This is if we do have pass-through, which is kind of metadata associated with the video upload. What we do is provide that pass-through as a JSON string. So we'll decode it here. Otherwise, just give it an empty array. And the update payload is kind of what we want the database record to be looking like. So we have the ID for the entry ID, which comes in that metadata. We have a playback ID, which comes from Mux in the body of the webhook payload. And we have a status variable as well. Now we'll probably want to make some adjustments to the status. At the very least, we'll make sure it's uppercase, as we learned before. And if there's an aspect ratio, we're also including that in the update payload as well. So here it's saying if the entry exists and is ready, we aren't going to do anything. And I believe that this is due to just the asynchronous nature of webhooks based off of if we're handling a create webhook or an update webhook, we're basically going to create the entry and only create it if it doesn't already exist. Otherwise, we're going to update it. But we'll take either webhook that comes to us because we could potentially receive the video.asset.ready webhook before we receive the video.asset.created webhook. Even though those would be out of order, it is possible for that to happen. So we want to make sure we handle both cases there. So we're going to check the entries table to see if the entry is already ready. If it is, then don't do anything. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and update the record with the information that we need. Now, this call here, I think we would want to instead use the entry model instead of the database. So let's take a look at how we can use a model to update the record. Over in the Laravel documentation for the ORM, we're seeing an upsert method, which is kind of what we were looking for, recreating in the old application, which will update it if it exists or insert it if it doesn't exist. So this looks like a method that would exist right on the model itself. So we'll import the entries. So we'll do use app models entry. And then down here, I want to use an upsert instead. So let's go ahead and copy this. I'll use cursor to say, use the models upsert method instead, for example. Okay, that looks good. So I'll hit accept, and then we'll update with this sort of layout instead of what was recommended before. So I think this looks good. Now we also have an activity row, which we haven't talked about just yet, but I'm just going to comment that out for the time being until we're ready to go down that path. Now we'll make sure to also update this. So make sure the status value is always uppercase. I wonder if there's like a Laravel. Let's take a look, a little side mission here. Wait, strings? Yeah, here we go. So Laravel includes a variety of functions for manipulating string values. Again, kind of a nice little feature. Maybe this will offer some kind of utility functions like we're used to using, like Lodash for some common functionality like this. But so there's an upper, converts the given string to upper. Why not? I mean, this is completely unnecessary, but just to kind of exercise that muscle, I'll go in and include the string support from Illuminate, and I will copy this, go down just a bit right here, string upper status. So that seems like it should do what it is that we're trying to do here, which is just make the string uppercase. So we'll also have to check here, is this ready? Like you're shouting it. And this isn't completely necessary. It just helps. Every time I see an uppercase string, it helps kind of like give me the indication that it is a constant or like a value that we're expecting for that string. So it's concrete. There's only a set few of them. And that just gives me kind of a visual indication that that's what we're working with here. Now we also had this video.upload.asset created handler. And I think during this refactor, we might get rid of this one. We used to have this assets table, and the only thing that it's really doing is storing a delete key, which allows us to delete an entry, a guestbook entry. But I don't think we actually need this assets table anymore. I think that it's simple enough functionality that we could probably just merge this into our entries table. So we can combine assets and entries into just the entries table. And then we can create the delete key right on the entry so that if somebody does wish to delete, they have to have that actual delete key, which is a little token, a unique token that it would exist on the local machine or associated with that record, and will allow them to delete that if they want to kind of like, retry another entry in the guest book. Maybe they had Dorito cheese on their face or something like that. So we'll get rid of that one and just kind of ignore that for now. So I think we're in a good spot to at least see if we are to hook up the Mux webhooks for our endpoint, whether or not our entries are updated with the latest status coming from Mux. So let's give that a go. I'm heading over to our Mux dashboard. I'm going to go to settings, webhooks, and also bring up the Laravel. So here is a previous webhook that we had configured. I'm actually going to turn that one off for now. And we're going to create a new webhook. I believe, let me just double check here. Yeah, this is where we created the access token. So we want to make sure that we are creating the webhooks in the same environment as the webhooks. So these all need to kind of match up here. So I'm going to select Laravel here, create a new webhook. The URL to notify is our URL that we've had on localcan. Localcan, bring it up here, hit copy, create a new webhook, Laravel here. And then we also want the /mux/webhook route there. So create webhook. So anytime I upload a video to Mux now, or really anytime that there's any changes that happen within the Mux account that we can subscribe to, we will be notified at this URL. So if we go to listen for webhooks, there's actually a whole webhook reference over on the Mux docs of all the different events that can be fired to your webhook handler when an upload is created, when an asset is updated, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of look through here, get the types, get the descriptions of what the event includes and what it is that you care about in the event, the information that you're looking to handle. Well, I say let's go ahead and give this a try. We see we have this kind of like orphaned entry over here that hasn't been updated because it was recorded before we had webhooks set up at all. So that one's we're gonna have to get rid of that one. But let's see if we can get the webhooks working here now. So here's me again. So let's hit record and see. We should get a new record. And we should also get some events sent to our application that are handled by our listener and update the entry accordingly. So we should get a playback ID, a status that is different from the status that's created during our upload controller call, which is, if you remember, it's initializing. And so we should get a different status for that. And the aspect ratio of the video, if it's available, which is only available on the event for ready. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. So I'll hit record. 3, 2, 1. That's my go-to move. I don't really know what else to do. Okay, so we do have some more client-side functionality that still needs to be in place, but let's see if this updated a local record. So one way that I being new to Laravel, I realized that we can still interact with our application using a little helper called Tinker. Tinker is a way to interact with the application using the code that is written within our application. So let's try that out, Tinker. And this looks like maybe it would load up our model, so we could go ahead and just make a call to basically the same thing that happens when our application loads, which if we go to routes, web, and we're calling entry all, and we did get a new entry created here. Here's today's date, but notice we still have a status of initializing. So something seems like it didn't necessarily work as expected there. So let's dig in a little further and see maybe what was going on here. We do have a new asset that was created. There's me pointing at the camera. Shirt matches, hair matches. We have a video asset ready event, which was called. And if I look at the response body, we did get a 500 when it was called locally. So something seems to have happened here that didn't go as planned for our webhook handler. And I wonder if we can pull up this log within Laravel herd potentially. So just kind of clicking around in my Laravel application under storage logs, we do have this laravel.log file, which is kind of nice to be able to pull up the logs that have persisted and occurred within the requests for our application. So we're seeing that there is an error, undefined array key entry ID. So I think what we're trying to do was use an entry ID value, which doesn't currently exist on the metadata for our submission. So let's see if we can track that down. Now notice over here in our upload controller, we do have the pass-through being set, but it's actually checking the wrong place for the entry ID. If I look at the old application, we're looking at the data returned from our insert command over here for Supabase, and then using to make sure if we do have that data, use that data, that row's ID as our entry ID within the metadata. And that's not currently what's happening over here with this functionality. So what we need to do is take the entry and use that information, the record ID off of the entry rather than checking the request data. So I'll get that updated here now. Just a quick change in the code to use the entry that was returned from our create call up here. And we're going to use the ID property as our entry ID. And so I save this. Now let's go ahead and give this another go. I'm going to go back to my application, hit reload. We see we got 2 orphan entries now. That'll be okay. We'll record 3, 2, 1. And what else can I do? Man, I just got all of the funny faces, don't I? Okay, so we have our new entry that ideally has been uploaded to Mux. Let's close out of this. Let's go back to our assets, Laravel video. Here is our new entry. We see that the asset is already ready, and this is looking better this time. We got a 204 response code. I'm going to run the entry all once again, and look at that. We do have a successful entry that's been updated for status ready. We got the aspect ratio, we got a playback ID. Everything's looking good here now. So the problem is we need to get this sent back down to the client without any kind of reloads. Nobody's got time for reload. What do you want me to do? Sit here and reload all the time? I don't think so. So even though that we're showing up as expected down here, although maybe the order isn't exactly what I would want, I'll have to reverse the order. We can't reload. We need to have this real-time communication back down to the client. So we're handling the webhook successfully. Mux can contact this application through the public URL, but now we need to get the client notified of these changes as well. So that's what we're going to take a look at in this next part of the video. I'm going to pause because I need a sandwich. Thanks for watching so far. We'll keep on chugging.